Do you believe in investing into loss-making companies?
The reality is that the future cash flow is what matters, not the current loss or the past loss. Nearly 800,000 unique PANs. More than 500,000 are SIP investors of our. I always tell people that asset allocation is actually not maths, it is chemistry. 30 years back, consumer discretionary नाम का कुछ listing नहीं होता था.
India is not innovating enough.
See, I feel that it's about stage of evolution. So SIP is also the worst form of investment.
So basically, जब भी ऐसा लगे कि बस अब खत्म होने वाला है, that is the time you should enter the market. Welcome to the 5th episode of Wealth Insights by Invedza, where we talk about money, investing, and personal finance. Today we have Executive Director and CEO of WhiteOak Mutual Funds, Aashish Somaiyaa. Welcome to the show, sir. Thank you so much for giving us your time. सर, आप सबसे दो विजनरी लोगों के साथ काम किए अभी तक, एक रामदेव अग्रवाल, एक मोतीलाल ओसवाल. What is that one lesson जो आपको टेक्स्ट बुक्स ने नहीं सिखाया लेकिन इन दो लोगों ने सिखाया?
See, I think I've learned different things from both the people. And, overall, in fact, if you really ask me, I've been very lucky with bosses. Say, for example, you will be surprised. You mentioned about something to do with textbooks में नहीं सिखाया.
बराबर.
But from both of these people, actually, I honed my reading habit.
Okay.
So the first day that I joined Motilal Oswal, it's coincidental that both of them gave me a book each.
Okay.
Okay. Like Mr. Oswal gave me a book which is about sales and about business. And Mr. Agarwal gave me a book which is about strategy. Right, like the former was, this book called Ultimate Sales Machine, which is written by Chet Holmes.
Okay.
And the other one was a book called Understanding Michael Porter, which is written by a lady called Joanne Magreta. Right. So actually, they both have a fabulous reading habit.
Okay.
And there are a lot of people, like when you said that, which you don't teach in the textbooks. So not textbooks, but what I've seen is that if you read, obviously your brain is the foremost example of neural networks.
Right.
So if you read, that's when, a lot of things get connected in your mind. And a lot of people say कि किताब पढ़ के आप धंधा नहीं चला सकते हो.
सही बात है.
वो बात सही है, लेकिन किताब पढ़ के आप धंधा चला सकते हो. वो भी
That is
सही
possible.
है. क्योंकि जो real ज्ञान है ना, see in today's world, I mean you and me are talking on a podcast. But the reality is that the real gyan is still in the textbooks,
right.
Quite an extent, right? Only thing is that when we are practitioners, we need to be able to assimilate all the diverse sources of knowledge. We need to, marry that with our practical on-ground experience. And then, we need to get a culmination of that in terms of how we actually run our business.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, both of them have a big influence on my thinking, and I became a better professional, obviously after working with them. And now I'm lucky to work with Prashant Khemkha, who founded WhiteOak. So that's why I say, I'm lucky with bosses.
The bosses. Sir, Gen Z, millennial, सबका thinking बहुत change होते जा रहा है. Their consumption patterns are changed. Like our parents used to save most of the money. Nowadays, Gen Z, millennials, they are trying to spend most of their money consumption.
So even you and me are different generation,
yes.
Actually. So, because I should tell you, I'm 50.
हाँ,
you must be
32.
Yeah, so.
तो अब आगे आने वाले जो सेक्टर्स है जो मोस्ट ग्रोइंग है, आई डोंट थिंक दे विल बी लाइक द जो आईटी सेक्टर का बूम आ गया, फार्मा का सेक्टर का बूम आ गया, बिकॉज लाइक यू सेड इंडियाज जनरेशन इज अहेड 10-12 years आगे फ्यूचर है हमारा. यू थिंक देयर विल बी अ मेजर शिफ्ट इन द सेक्टर्स विच विल डू वेरी गुड इन द नियर फ्यूचर 10 years?
See, yeah, I can tell you how I have seen this in two examples. I can tell you how I have seen it shifting or evolving. One example, for instance, is the whole consumer, right? So let me give you a bit of a story. In late 90s, when I was a trainee and then I got on rolls of what is now it's called ICICI Prudential Mutual Fund. Back then it was called Prudential ICICI Mutual Fund. I joined there as a trainee in 1999. And I distinctly remember, so that's my former employer, they launched a FMCG fund. So पहले तो you see Abhishek, it was not called consumer. It's called FMCG.
FMCG.
In FMCG, if you bought maybe Dabur, Bata, maybe I think Procter and Gamble, I think Nestle, 4-5 स्टॉक लोगे तो खत्म हो गया आपके पास, है नहीं, मतलब
कुछ है ही नहीं कंजम्पशन में.
Now you fast forward, in that period India has gone from being a very poor country to being lower middle class, meaning we must have, $1,000 per capita हमारा 2007 में था. तो आप 99-2000 में समझो क्या ही होगा. I even remember now when I was a kid, when there were advertisements of dental products on TV. You know what it said? It said, अरे राजू तुम्हारे दांत तो मोतियों जैसे चमक रहे हैं. तो बोलते क्यों ना हो मास्टर जी, मैं डाबर का लाल दंत मंजन इस्तेमाल करता हूँ. So that tells you a lot. What is a reputed consumer brand advertising on TV telling people कि भाई कोयला और दातून मत इस्तेमाल करो, कम से कम दंत मंजन इस्तेमाल करो. That's where our country was.
बराबर.
Today when you see advertisement of dental products on TV, what does it say? It says that it assumes that you are using toothpaste. But it says that if you have had desserts in your dinner, please brush once more. You saw the change in 25 years. Now the consumer sector is called consumer staples and consumer discretionary. And FMCG is a small subsector of consumer staples. 30 years back, consumer discretionary नाम का कुछ listing नहीं होता था.
Right.
So now you have white goods, apparels, beauty, fashion, footwear,
बराबर.
the whole electronics, the whole thing. So that is how much it has transformed. So if in last 20-25 years I can tell you how much it has transformed, you should visualize for yourself that next 25 years how much you think it will transform. And my sense is that in the next 15-20 years, everything which is high-end consumption, luxury residential, all of these kinds of things will have disproportionate growth. And that is why you are seeing that the consumer staples like FMCG is always citing challenges in growing. Because people are buying niche brands, DTC brands, expensive, highly specialized, natural, Ayurvedic.
Right.
So everywhere what you will find is that people will spend more. So expensive things will start doing well.
Right.
They will grow disproportionately faster because when a country goes from lower middle class to middle class, let's say if your per capita income goes from 2800 to 6000, unfortunately 140 crore people are not going to become middle class.
बराबर.
A lot of people will go from poverty to lower middle class. But why does the whole country go on an average to middle class? Is because few lakh people will become very rich. Few thousand people will become millionaires. So what will happen is that everything which is high-end luxury, premiumization, those things will outperform.
So आपके हिसाब से सर कौन से sectors है which you think will do very good?
That's what these are the sectors I mentioned. I mean everything to do with high-end consumption.
Okay. Anything with branding, premiumization and वो सब. So
Disproportionate growth would be there. Retailing, luxury, beauty. The other thing, for example, is within financial services, like whatever 26 years I have seen in my career, it started with PSU banks, then private sector banks, then NBFCs, then multiple types of NBFCs.
Right.
But last 5 years, you can distinctly see capital market is outperforming every other segment of BFSI.
100%.
That is here to stay.
Right. Do you believe in investing into loss-making companies?
See, the reality is that the future cash flow is what matters, not the current loss or the past loss.
Okay. So you're okay to invest into a company which is loss-making currently, but will have a.
So the reality is that 1,000 बार लोग पढ़ते हैं value of a business is present value of its future cash flows.
बराबर.
It doesn't say anywhere EPS, PAT, अभी का loss, पहले का loss. Doesn't say any of that. At this point in time, what is my hypothesis of the future? That is ultimately what matters. The other thing is also that when you say loss-making companies, I presume that you're talking about not loss-making in general. You're talking about new age
Startups
businesses,
and
tech
yes.
business. So there is a bit of a accounting challenge also, right? I mean, if I make a steel plant and invest few thousand crores, you'll allow me to capitalize
Right.
and depreciate over a decade and a half.
Right.
But when new age businesses come up, you don't allow them to depreciate capitalize and depreciate, say, performance marketing costs or cloud computing costs, or other than the heavy equipment, you don't allow anything to be
Capitalized and
other than the
depreciated
hardware. You don't.
over a period
Maybe
of time.
software licenses are treated differently and all, but limited, right? So ultimately, when a business is set up, all business are in cash loss. It depends how you account for it. So
Right.
new age companies को आप वो accounting में रियायत तो देते नहीं हो.
बराबर.
All so-called old age companies को बहुत लीवे मिलता है accounting में. अब आप देखिए आजकल B schools हैं. In B schools there is a course called accounting for investors.
अच्छा. Okay.
Why they teach accounting for investors? Because people admit that currently what our accounting is for tax professionals and for
Income tax perspective, government
reporting.
perspective more.
Yes.
Right. Right.
But accounting for investors, like WhiteOak strictly does free cash flow.
Okay.
All the DCF that we build, all our hypothesis of businesses that we build, we use free cash flow, and free cash flow after paying cost of capital. So only the excess free cash
Okay.
flow.
While choosing the companies in which you
When we
invest.
hypothesize the future,
Okay. Okay.
when we build our DCF, when we build our valuation, we build it on free cash flow, and
Okay.
from the free cash flow also we deduct
The capital cost.
the cost of capital,
Oh,
which means that the efficacy of a business is only if it can generate returns in free cash flow terms over and above its cost of capital.
बराबर. So
Right.
you do this for the future, like कि
Of
next
course.
5 years, 10 years के
Yeah.
cash flow के
Yes,
basis
that's
पे.
our hypothesis of how this business will
Got
play
it.
out. And then whenever the company declares its sales numbers and results, our hypothesis is getting tested. We have to fine tune.
Got it. सर पीयूष गोयल ने एक बहुत रिसेंट इवेंट में बोला था कि इंडिया इज़ नॉट इनोवेटिंग इनफ. डू यू रियली थिंक कि इंडिया इज़ नॉट इनोवेटिंग इनफ?
See, I feel that it's about stage of evolution. Okay, it's about stage of evolution. I'll tell you why. The reason is because for everything, you cannot straight away go to 12th standard. You have to go to first standard, second standard, third. कोई super bright रहेगा तो उसको double promotion मिलेगा. But सीधा तो 12वीं तक तो नहीं पहुंचेगा, सीधा तो graduation नहीं होएगा. Few minutes back, even before you asked me this question, quite unpromptedly I told you that importing, assembly, backward integration, indigenization.
बराबर.
Correct. So what I feel is that when certain industries develop and when they have the critical mass in terms of data, in terms of experience, in terms of use cases, then they will innovate on their own,
बराबर.
right? So I think it's about evolution. I think you will see a lot of change in next 10, 12 years.
गॉट इट. गॉट इट. सर अभी इन्फ्लेशन रेट अपना ऑलमोस्ट स्टेबल है. लाइक वी आर हैविंग अ लिटिल इनफैक्ट डिक्लाइनिंग इन्फ्लेशन रेट
Yeah.
ओनली. सो अकॉर्डिंग यू टू यू व्हाट एसेट क्लासेस वन शुड in the current scenario, not for a 5 year 10 year perspective, but somebody from a short term perspective of 2 year 3 years, in a stable inflation economy, which asset classes one should pick up?
See, I mean, equity is always a no-brainer. The reason being that, and in fact, even in inflationary times, what you find is that good companies are able to pass on the effect of inflation. So, in that sense, equities tend to be kind of, inflation is already accounted for and they are inflation proof in that sense. The other important thing you will see is that ideally speaking, a lot of the move in the fixed income market has already played out. But if we met few months back, then I would have table thumpingly said fixed income. Maybe even now there is some potential for appreciation, but I think bulk of it is actually behind us.
Behind us.
The other thing which I feel is that because of inflation being in control, rates are coming down, and generally in this kind of environment, REITs, InvITs, yield-based assets, because what will happen is all these REITs, InvITs, commercial properties, people who do lease rental discounting, all of this is leveraged, right? So 2 3 things will happen. One is that when the yields go down, the way you do the pricing, the underlying yielding asset will appreciate. The second thing is because they are leveraged, the rate at which they obtain the leverage, that also will go down.
Right.
So they will have a accretive leverage actually, correct? So yeah, I mean this is what I can think of off the hat
Got it.
in
Got it.
terms of what should do well.
Sir, aviation sector is going through a turmoil. There's a recent unfortunate accident
Yeah.
also or
Yeah,
incident.
yeah, yeah.
You think aviation sector will be a good bet for the next 5 years, 10 years?
See, what happens is that when there are unfortunate events, which nobody wants to face really. I mean, I take maybe 6 flights in a week, literally. Okay, and but still, aviation by far is the safest mode of travel. But every once in say 5 10 years, when such a catastrophic event happens, it's very it hurts. It disturbs, and nobody wants to see such a loss of life for no rhyme or reason really. So that is the unfortunate part of it. But if you really ask me, it is going to. I mean, it's a sector which is in India is going to grow significantly because when I did not flesh it out probably adequately, but when I said consumption, high-end consumption, luxury, see, travel, tourism, hotel, all of this is part of it. And I literally am on the road 15, 20 times, 15, 20 days in a month. Okay, and there's practically hardly any airport which I haven't spent a couple of hours on. So aviation is set to grow because the moment people have some disposable income, they want to explore,
Right. Right.
right? So it's bound to grow disproportionately, and you can see the fleet additions, and you can see the number of I think we've gone from less than 100 to maybe 144 active airports or something in last 5-6 years.
Got it. Got it. So, sir, there was a recent incident in Blue Smart with
Yeah.
respect to accounting and all. So, at White Oak, how do you all take care of the forensic accounting, and what are the red flags you all usually try to see?
See, we have like a elaborate, if you see our any of our presentations, for example, we lay out the entire process. But I can tell you, verbally, like say, in fact, on your first point, we do have a forensic accounting team actually. So, and not just forensic accounting, but the entire governance framework. So it falls into 4 or 5 different parts. Like accounting is one of them. History of having been unfair to minority shareholders, right? That could be, for example, another one. Then promoters having conflicting, conflict of interest which is undisclosed, which you need to figure out through channel checks. So there are multiple areas within governance which we look at, and forensic accounting is just one of them.
So, what is the biggest red flag according to you? कि here you get कि यार अब मजा नहीं आ रहा मतलब.
See, first thing we are able to triangulate very early on is because even before you asked me this question, if you remember, I mentioned that we do everything on free cash flow basis.
बराबर.
Because अगर आप पास्ट में देखिएगा ना, तो बहुत सारा चीज़ जो हुआ है द अकाउंटिंग के रिलेटेड इज़ बिकॉज you're not focusing on free cash flow. Right, so inventory receivable, this is under, some expenses overstated, and all those kinds of things is where the things tend to fall apart.
Right.
So your first thing where you're saving yourself and your investors is basically because you're focusing on free cash flow.
Right.
Correct. I think that is something to really
So cash flow
watch out.
basically,
Absolutely.
that's the
something to
biggest red
really,
flag.
Yeah, that's the biggest, because in all the past instances, that is where it has, come out.
Right. Sir, do PMS investors are more volatile? Basically, जब भी मार्केट थोड़ा ज़्यादा गिरता है तो PMS investors ज़्यादा react करते हैं as compared to mutual fund investors?
Yeah, I mean, see, I always tell that, if you're invested in a portfolio management service, then the transparency is of such a high magnitude that you need that much more maturity. I can tell you, having managed both, there's nothing which happens in a PMS which does not happen in a mutual fund, right? Like, you buy shares, there is STT, there is brokerage. When you buy at a particular price. You will have inflow, you will buy more. You'll have redemption, you might sell. All of this happens in a mutual fund. Same
Right.
things happen in a PMS. Other than the operating configuration, in a PMS, it's your demat account. I'm trading on your behalf, and everything is accounted individually for you. Whereas in a mutual fund, you are part of a pool.
Right.
In a PMS, your cash flows are segregated. In a mutual fund, again, it's part of a pool. So, other than the operating configuration, everything is same.
Same.
It's just that PMS has a lot more transparency. So, in a falling market, what will happen? If a PMS portfolio falls 15%, there could be a mutual fund also which falls 15%.
Right.
But what happens is, in a PMS, you will be able to see stock by stock, trade by trade, everything. You will be able to see, अच्छा ये शेयर आपने ये भाव पे लिया था, अभी ये हो गया, पहले क्यों नहीं बेचा?
बराबर.
Correct. But that's the whole point, that in a PMS the transparency is so high that people tend to question more. But it's actually a format which is very transparent, and which is where the ability to handle that transparency needs maturity. Seeing so much data causes people to react that much more.
Yes.
Correct. So I think that's where it comes. Plus, yes, there is also some nuance about the offering itself, because it is equally true that there are some PMSs which are extremely aggressive. Like, if you have 6, 7 stocks, 10 stocks, 12 stocks, if you have a bunch of 10, 12 stocks, which is only small cap, micro cap, then the volatility will be of a different magnitude altogether.
Right.
Whereas in mutual funds, what happens is that every mutual fund is a portfolio. That portfolio has its investment pattern, investment universe, benchmark. Nowadays we are disclosing information ratio, so many things.
Right.
So that's where the difference is.
Okay. Sir, अभी भी आपको लगता है स्मॉल कैप और मिड कैप आर लिटिल ऑन द एक्सपेंसिव साइड बिकॉज एवरी न्यूज़ चैनल एंड एवरीवेयर इट्स कमिंग एंड इवन सम जीनियस पीपल आर कमिंग ऑन टीवी एंड सेइंग कि मिड कैप और स्मॉल कैप से दूर रहिए, एक्सपेंसिव है. एंड इफ समबडी वांट्स टू इन्वेस्ट, हाउ शुड दे इन्वेस्ट, लमसम और थ्रू द SIP मोड, whether it's large cap or mid and small cap?
See, one thing is very clear, that when you're investing in a equity, which is a volatile asset class, and by and large most of us are salaried individuals.
Yes.
So SIP is the best form of investing. वो तो मतलब Winston Churchill once said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others which have been tried.
Right.
So SIP is also the worst form of investment except for all the other modes of investing which you may have tried. Correct? It's the most optimal. It
बराबर.
may not be perfect. So that is the no-brainer part of it. The other part which you mentioned, तो I always tell people कि वो स्टॉक को बेचारे को या वो बिजनेस को या प्रमोटर को नहीं मालूम है कि आप उसको स्मॉल कैप बोलते हैं मिड कैप बोलते हैं उसको फर्क नहीं पड़ता है.
बराबर.
The business dynamics are not going to change just because you call it small cap.
बराबर.
Your reaction, response, and volatility can change. But the business doesn't change because you called it small cap. And by the way, in India, if you think that our per capita income is going to grow, we spoke about so many sectors, our future, etc. How can that happen without some small companies becoming big? Can't
Right.
happen, no? Right? So I think having exposure to small cap, mid cap, not because small and mid cap will necessarily outperform large cap. आपको जान के आश्चर्य होगा अगर आप पिछले 15-20 साल का डेटा देखोगे ना, स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स वर्सेस लार्ज कैप इंडेक्स मुश्किल से 1% CAGR का डिफरेंस है.
Okay.
But when you do active stock selection, small caps have a wide dispersion in performance. There is huge amount of heterogeneity, and that is why stock picking, alpha generation potential is there. And people like us, we have like 34 people in fund management and research. Just research is 34 people.
Right.
So we cover 1,000 companies bottom up. So that is the happy hunting ground for us to generate alpha. So we would always be exposed to small and mid cap, not because ultimately small cap will outperform. ऐसा कुछ हिस्ट्री में डेटा में नहीं है.
बराबर.
बट डेटा में ये ज़रूर है कि हेट्रोजेनाइटी की वजह से स्मॉल कैप में अल्फा पोटेंशियल
ज़्यादा है.
ज़्यादा है.
मुझे तो सर कभी कभी बुरा लगता है कोई कंपनी 251 से 500 दे, मतलब ऑलमोस्ट इंडिया की सबसे बड़ी कंपनीज में से है.
Yes.
और हम उसे स्मॉल कैप बोलते हैं. एंड द लिक्विडिटी हैज सो मच इंक्रीज्ड इन मिड एंड स्मॉल कैप. आई पर्सनली फील कि देयर सम अदर वर्ड शुड कम.
See, liquidity and the volatility and the vagaries of the market make it difficult for people to negotiate small cap in an open-ended format. That I agree. But the point is that you have to figure a way around it. Like we invest in small cap through AIFs, for instance.
Okay.
Right? Because it's not daily liquidity. You can have a fund of 500-700 crores and then that's it. There's nothing telling us what is small cap, what is micro cap. And mind you, today, if you ask me, all this electronics manufacturing, defense, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, थोड़े समय पहले तक all the capital market companies, ये सब new ideation तो happens in small cap, mid cap only. You see last 6 years, wealth management, asset management, broking, diagnostics, chemicals, engineering, R&D, electronics manufacturing, all of this came into the market. They were bulk of them small and mid cap.
नहीं तो ये वैल्यूएशन पे भी डालना चाहिए, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है.
See, क्या होता है when people talk valuation, first of all they are talking index.
बराबर.
Second, they are talking small cap in general.
बराबर.
तो मेरा जैसे बोलते हैं ना necessity is the mother of all invention. ऐसा मेरा खुद का बिलीफ है कि generalization is the mother of all discrimination.
अच्छा.
People are talking generally small cap is expensive. अरे what does it mean? We cover 1,000 companies. Which small cap you're talking about?
राइट.
At any point in time, there will be opportunities. And ultimately, we have to beat the benchmark. No? So beating the benchmark is a relative activity.
राइट. राइट. सर म्यूचुअल फंड्स यूजुअली लोग सिर्फ पास्ट रिटर्न्स देख के इन्वेस्ट करते हैं. अकॉर्डिंग टू यू व्हाट 2-3 मोर रेशियोज, ओनली 3 रेशियोज विच अ पर्सन शुड लुक बियॉन्ड द पास्ट रिटर्न्स व्हाइल इन्वेस्टिंग इनटू म्यूचुअल
3 भी
फंड्स?
नहीं, एक ही देखना चाहिए. Information ratio देखना चाहिए. Because which is
Okay.
now the regulator is on the right track. They made it mandatory for disclosure that all equity funds should upload their information ratio every day.
And
For
what is
last 1 year
information
period.
ratio?
See, it's like this. It's basically for, let's say, last 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Over this period, what alpha have you generated? That's the numerator. Divided by standard deviation of alpha. Means
Okay.
that if I say that my alpha is, say, 5%, but in my worst, I have done minus 15%, and best is plus 30%. तो किस काम का है वो?
राइट.
Right? I mean, when you look at cricketers, there are many people which have a high average, but pathetic consistency. There are many people who have slightly lower average, but amazing consistency. So on the 5th day of a test match, you want the guy with probably little lower average but high consistency.
राइट. वी वांट राहुल
So
द्रविड़.
information ratio tells you about consistency of outperformance of fund managers.
राइट. राइट. सर बहुत सारे म्यूचुअल फंड हाउसेस या कुछ म्यूचुअल फंड हाउसेस हमने पैसा इक्विटी के लिए डाला है, बट दे आर होल्डिंग कैश इन अ लार्ज चंक लाइक 10%, 20%. यू थिंक दैट इज द राइट स्ट्रेटजी द म्यूचुअल फंड हाउस, एंड इज इट द राइट वे टू डू इट?
See, right wrong नहीं होता है. There has to be a perspective and a context. Investors know what they are doing. When they want to put money in equity, they give me money in an equity fund. And as far as taking cash is concerned, sometime market goes up, sometime market goes down, then having cash I will look smart.
बराबर.
But that's a coin toss. Sometimes market can go up also, no?
Yes.
अभी अभी लोगों को लगा थर्ड वर्ल्ड वॉर होने वाला है, लेकिन मार्केट तो ऊपर ही जा रहा है. यूक्रेन रशिया ऑल्सो एस्केलेशन, इंडिया पाकिस्तान. सो द वर्ल्ड इज वेरी पोलराइज्ड. सो पीपल हैव बीन फियरिंग दैट दीज वॉर्स विल एस्केलेट. तो कब तक कैश पकड़ के रखने का है? So what will happen is that you may have all the right reasons to believe market will go down, but market behavior in the short term is a coin toss.
Right.
It can go up also. So my worldview is very clear. My worldview is that if Abhishek has given me money to allocate in equity, I am supposed to allocate in equity and beat the equity benchmark by being in equity.
Right.
I should not be beating the equity benchmark by not being in equity.
Yes. और कैश होल्ड करना रहता तो
आप
I
करते
would
ना, हाँ.
do it.
And
मैं
the
आपको
investor,
क्यों देता?
yeah, and the investor, see the largest constituency of investors is doing anyway SIP.
Right.
So they know what they're doing. Nearly 800,000 unique PANs.
800,000. Okay.
Unique. More than 500,000 are SIP investors of ours.
Sir, what's the investment philosophy of WhiteOak's multi-asset allocation fund?
See, basically, it comes from this thought process that I always tell people that asset allocation is actually not maths, it is chemistry.
Okay.
Take a balanced advantage fund. Let's say we are running since 2.5 years. On average, we have been 55% in equity.
Okay.
On average. And equity has delivered some 15% compounded since the time we've been in existence. So any normal, logical, arithmetically oriented person, you know what they will say? They'll say, अच्छा, on an average 55% equity, तो उसका 15% तो 7% उधर आया.
बराबर.
7.5%. बाकी 45% पे 7% आप गिनो तो 3-4% उधर आया, तो आपका ग्रॉस रिटर्न हो गया 11. उसमें एक्सपेंस रेशियो ले लो 1.5-2%, तो आपका फंड का रिटर्न आना चाहिए 9 से 9.5.
बराबर.
बट एक्चुअली फंड का रिटर्न इक्विटी के बराबर है.
कैसे?
That's why I say it's not maths. Generally, people, despite when people think of asset allocation, despite it being an asset allocation situation, people cannot get rid of the individual asset class from their head. So
Right.
why I said chemistry? देखो, एक बार हाइड्रोजन और ऑक्सीजन को कंबाइन करेंगे ना तो पानी बन जाता है. फिर वो पानी में आप हाइड्रोजन के प्रॉपर्टीज नहीं ढूंढ सकते हो, और उस पानी में आप ऑक्सीजन के प्रॉपर्टीज भी
नहीं
ढूंढ सकते हो. पानी इज अ completely different thing.
बराबर.
Second, if you mix hydrogen and oxygen in one particular manner, it will make water. But if you mix hydrogen and oxygen another manner, it becomes hydrogen peroxide. It can burn you.
Right.
Third thing is how hydrogen behaves on its own is very different from how hydrogen behaves in the company of oxygen.
Okay.
If I meet you alone, you're a different person.
Right.
If I invite you with your wife, you'll be a different person. No, you'll not be the same person.
Right.
थोड़ा आई होप थोड़ा तो डिफरेंस
Yes,
पड़ेगा.
100%.
राइट. सो एसेट क्लासेस आर ऑल्सो लाइक दैट. पीपल जनरली थिंक इक्विटी ऐसा बिहेव करेगा. करेक्ट है भाई, लेकिन वो 55% इक्विटी है, उसके साथ 45% डेट भी है, एंड एवरी टाइम द मार्केट चेंजेस वो रीबैलेंस हो रहा है.
So what's
There
the
is a interplay.
philosophy in the rebalancing? How do you all rebalance?
We follow adjusted price to book. I mean price to book, rolling 10-year price to book adjusted for the return on equity,
Okay.
earnings into bond yield. We track all these things. And the model has to be sensitive. पिछले 9 महीने से फंड में रिटर्न बन रहा है लेकिन मार्केट नहीं चल रहा है, बट 3-4 हज़ार पॉइंट निफ्टी का मूवमेंट में
पैसा बन जाता है.
रीबैलेंस होना चाहिए ना.
बराबर.
इफ इट इज मल्टी एसेट देन नॉट जस्ट डेट एंड इक्विटी, देन देयर इज अ थर्ड एलिमेंट विच इज गोल्ड ऑल्सो.
Right.
सो योर क्वेश्चन वाज ऑन मल्टी एसेट, उसमें थर्ड एलिमेंट आता है गोल्ड का.
बराबर.
नाउ गोल्ड पे भी ना लोगों का व्यू है गोल्ड पे. आई डोंट हैव अ व्यू ऑन गोल्ड. I am very clear the gold is there because I know that the day equity misbehaves, the gold will protect the downside.
Right.
So gold is there for lack of correlation with equity. Gold is not there because gold will go up. I don't care. So people need to understand that each asset class, don't look at it individually. अभी किसी जैसे 3 साल पहले ना 2.5 साल पहले when we were doing multi asset, people said why are you holding 24% in gold? Gold doesn't do anything.
अच्छा, you are holding 24% in gold.
Yeah, at the highest
Okay.
it was 24. So people will say, why do you own gold? It produces no result. I say, yes, that is probably your correct view when you look at gold on a standalone basis. But how do you think gold will behave if US economy tanks, if geopolitics gets complicated,
Right.
if dollar depreciates? Then it will behave very differently because then equity will go down,
बराबर.
US dollar will go down, US equity will go down, then gold will behave very differently, which is what has happened. So you are not supposed to do asset allocation by having a view on individual asset classes. You are more concerned that how they'll behave when combined. You're not concerned how they'll behave individually.
Right.
That's the mistake people make.
राइट सर एक हाइपोथेटिकल एग्जांपल लेते हैं. अंबानी कम्स टू यू एंड गिव्स यू अ 5 करोड़ चेक कि यार आशीष ये इसको इन्वेस्ट करो. वे वुड यू इन्वेस्ट? पीएमएस, एआईएफ, म्यूचुअल फंड में कहाँ? एक यू नो अंबानी हैज ऑल द मनी इन द लाइफ, सो दिस सरप्लस 5 करोड़ वे यू वुड इन्वेस्ट.
See, you've given an example of a family or a person to whom whatever I do won't matter.
Yes.
But let us say just think of a normal client
Yes.
and not such a big
तो आपके पास
name.
टेबल पे 5 करोड़ रुपया किसी ने रखा है, आप कहाँ
So
डालते?
I will have to ask, right? What are you expecting from it?
This is the entire surplus money, the wealth generating money, 10 years, 15 years. He doesn't want to see it also. He doesn't
I'll
want
put
to
it
know
in a
the
multi-cap fund.
multi-cap fund. Okay. Where
Absolutely.
mid cap, small cap,
Yeah,
large
yeah. So
cap.
it's like, it covers the either flexi cap or multi cap because it covers the entire spectrum. And there are no tilts or no biases in it.
Right.
So actually, flexi cap is better because it's complete latitude. But even multi cap would do the job.
Right. Right.
Because the reason for flexi cap, multi cap basically is like this, that it's not, the way we manage is there are no biases and no tilts. The fund manager has complete latitude.
Okay. So last question, sir. आपने इतने सारे मार्केट साइकिल्स देखे, अप डाउन साइडवेज.
Yeah.
What is one line or one investment thing, philosophy which you have always kept in mind and which has मतलब वो आपको आगे बढ़ने में हमेशा हेल्प किया है? वन लाइन कि यार ये मैं टैटू बना के लिख दूँ.
Market is not predictable, but how people respond to the market is always predictable. That you should not forget.
And that is what has helped you in the last so many years to, because so much noise comes. जब मार्केट गिरने लगता है तो there is so much noise.
So I don't just observe the market. I am very mindful of how I see people are responding to the market. And I also keep in mind how I am feeling about the market. See, Abhishek, always, you said one sentence, I answered that one sentence, but I just want to explain something. Human beings have one major advantage compared to all other living beings. What is the biggest advantage that human beings have? It is called meta thinking.
Okay.
What is the meaning of meta thinking? We are the only living species who is capable of thinking about what we are thinking.
Okay.
Okay? That means that a brilliant person is able to think about what he is thinking and feeling.
उसके इमोशंस को वो कैप्चर कर पा रहा है. Right.
So see, when in a roller coaster, when the roller coaster is hurtling all the way down, जब आपने कसम खा लिया कि भाई मैं वापस कभी नहीं आएगा अभी इसमें, right?
तभी वो
कभी ये हाँ रुकेगा नहीं तो धरती फट के अंदर जाएगा.
सही बात है.
When your fear is at the worst, उसके बाद क्या होता है?
उसके बाद
It
ऊपर.
goes up, right? So that's why I said that markets are not predictable. How people respond to markets, that is always predictable,
Right.
right? So if you can observe how people are thinking and behaving, and if you can observe your own thoughts and behavior, that is a big clue.
So
You should always
basically जब
observe
भी
that.
ऐसा लगे कि बस अब खत्म होने वाला है, that is the time you should enter the
See,
market.
because in March 2020, सबको लगा भी हम लोग ही डायनासोर है, ये तो खत्म हो जाएगा.
बराबर.
5% केस फेटालिटी रेट होएगा, वैक्सीन 10 साल के बाद आएगा, ऐसा लगा ना सबको.
सही बात है.
तो ऐसे टाइम में पैसा डालेगा कौन? वो ही पैसा डालेगा जिसके दिमाग में एक खिड़की खुला है कि येस दिस लुक्स रियली बैड, बट द हिस्ट्री ऑफ द वर्ल्ड इज दैट ह्यूमन बीइंग्स आर क्वाइट जुगाड़ू, इसमें से कुछ ना कुछ अपना निकलेगा, तो वही पैसा डालेगा.
सही बात है.
उसके 1.5 साल में तो मार्केट 2.5 गुना हो गया. अक्टूबर 2021 में तो 18,500 हो गया. सो से यार ह्यूमन बीइंग्स आर सो फनी. अभी तुम बोल रहे थे कि सब मरने वाले हैं, अभी तुम बोल रहे हो हमारा अमृत काल आने वाला है. इतना कैसे चेंज हो गया 1.5 साल में?
बराबर.
So, that little, if you observe this, only then you will have a contrarian streak in yourself.
राइट. सर अब वाइट ओक के साथ क्या विजन है अगले 5 साल का, 10 साल का? Where you want to take it, or new things which you are coming up in the WhiteOak?
No, so that's, a lot of it is led by our founder's vision, that is Prashant, because I am CEO only for the domestic business. Our global business is actually 2x of our domestic business.
Okay.
Domestically, we manage 32,000 crores if you add PMS, mutual fund and AI. But our global business is probably more than 6.5 billion. So if you ask me in simple terms, in the next 5 to 10 years, if you talk about WhiteOak as a larger entity,
Right.
you will see that it will be a global asset manager, an Indian asset management company, but a truly global multinational asset manager.
in terms of policies, in
In
terms
terms
of
of already
investment
the reach, we
thesis?
already manage money. I'll take an example. We manage money in emerging markets,
Okay,
right? We have a partnership where in the US, we are managing money for Americans to invest in emerging markets.
okay,
We've been a manager, a manager of choice for global institutions, sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, university endowments to invest into India. We're one of the largest FPI investors into India as we speak.
okay.
So over the next 5 to 10 years, you will see that WhiteOak will be a global asset manager coming out of India.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.